Uh, was that your light was on that? I'm going to let Ms. Pinard start since she's the one that asked for this to be placed on the agenda. And if you can make your statements, and then we can have some discussion and make whatever actions necessary.
Yes, I'd like to first establish what exactly what we were asking for, because some of the comments got off in different directions. What was put on the agenda and what I'm asking for is that the board ask the U.S. Geological Survey for all current information regarding earthquakes, and that this information be incorporated into any approvals or licensing needs by the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. And all that is saying is that a lot has happened. And even from the information that Klaus brought forward, this was done in 1992 that already identified some possible changes. The major part of the information we have is from the 1970s. So it just seems very prudent to me, like we do on all of our building. I mean, we had seismic events happen, and we rewrote our building plans and our provisions so that they are more seismically sound. And thank God we did, because that's what's made the difference between how our community fared and some others even around the world that were devastated. So we have, as part of our whole safety program with people, said that whatever is the latest information, we're going to use that for whatever we're going to do, design, or build. We've done that in the past. We have the updated seismic standards for all buildings in our county and throughout the state. It seems no less logical that you would ask for the same information be included on whatever is happening at Diablo Canyon plant. Okay? And that's the essence of it. What is simply being asked here is that we ask the USGS for their latest information and analysis, and that analysis be incorporated into the process as we continue from here. That's what's on the board. Okay,
Okay, Ms. Bianchi?
I would agree with Supervisor Pinard that, Diablo Canyon and the earthquake problems are always a concern. Always, 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 and they ought to be. However, earthquakes in San Luis Obispo County are also, a concern for the other areas as well, because we also, I'm going to make this as short as possible, but it's going to go on for a while. We don't know the interconnectedness of our fault systems. We don't know how, the information may be at the USGS, I'm not sure. But we need to get the USGS down here so that we can map all of the fault systems that are in this county, the San Simeon Hosgri for Diablo Canyon, the Oceanic Nacimiento Wasna for the residents, and to determine how I'll shorten it to oceanic, how the oceanic fault interplays with the San Simeon Hosgri, or how that fault also interplays with all of the other ones that are parallel to it across the county into the San Andreas. Because I know at the top of the mountain there's the Rinconada, there's the Nacimiento that goes over on the other side of the mountain. We don't know, as a board of supervisors, the interconnectedness of all of this information, of all of these fault systems. And we need that information in this county so that the decision makers in the cities, in the services districts, and here at the board, so that we can make good and valid decisions relative to retrofitting the buildings. And although I have to find out, use yours, swipe Mike Ryan's here. Although I have to find out for sure how this works, there's a sentence in this statement by the White House press secretary: federal funding is available on a cost share basis for hazard mitigation measures. That may, and I'm saying may, that may make funding available for hazard mitigation, which would be retrofitting, because that's a hazard mitigation. And I'm really happy about that. But getting back to the USGS, we really need to have the USGS come in here, and we also need to coordinate with the NRC as to how we can get this fault information into and into the information relative to Diablo Canyon. And I had written a letter. The people from the NRC came down here around the 1st of December and met with some of us. And I had misunderstood something that one of the representatives had said during that meeting, and so I had written him a letter to clarify it, and I got his response yesterday. And I'm not sure from the response, which I passed out to all the other board members, whether our board can actually tell the NRC what it can do with relative to the safety issues. I'm just not sure. We have to look into that and see if in fact we can do that or cannot. I resent the fact that the NRC thinks it knows more about San Luis Obispo County than I do, but that's kind of the way it goes. However, with all of that being said, we need to have the United States Geological Survey, which is a federal government agency that does geological surveys. It's a well-respected, good organization. We need to have that independent analysis down here so that we will know what's going on. And I'm not sure whether we can incorporate any approvals of the plans that we do. That's not a problem. We can do that with no problem. And I would agree with that. But I don't know whether we can supersede the NRC.
Mr. South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions. I don't see any staff from planning to see if they will be able to respond, such as I think Mr. Eric Green brought up the fact that we have some new information. And my question was going to be, when Diablo was built, was San Simeon taken into consideration at that time? I don't think it was a fault that they did not know about it. But then I think the issue for me is we're asking USGS, and why aren't we asking NRC? Because in my thinking, and I think it's a fact that NRC is a higher agency who either employs USGS or receives information USGS. But even before I go there, I believe, and I stand to be corrected, that when we had this discussion, the recommendation was that we show support to Mrs. Boxer's request. And I don't have a problem doing so, but I also have a letter from Mrs. Boxer website that she requested the information from NRC, who is writing to them and urging them, their commission, to undertake an emergency inspection of Diablo Canyon. And she also ends her letter saying, I urge you to act quickly. We must ensure that all facilities are safe. I will contact you in the next few days. And there's a follow-up from NRC to Mrs. Boxer's saying the NRC inspected the plant, searching for broken, shifted, or leaking pipes and their support braces, displaced equipment, cracks in cement walls, and the plant's foundation and other signs of damage. No damage was observed. Just to cut it through all the language here, it ends this letter by saying NRC inspection will be documented in an inspection report, and we will send you, meaning to Ms. Boxer, a copy. What I would like us to be in the picture where NRC, whatever communications is going between them and Mrs. Boxer, that we are included and all those informations comes to us as well as to our planning staff, because I do think that when we talk about earthquakes, and that earthquake results and any findings will be factored in the application. And if I'm wrong, I would like somebody to correct me on that issue. But let me say also that even though the earthquake or any damages done to any nuclear plant will be the worst of disasters, but I don't want to stop there thinking that we have a railroad coming right to our residence. Are we asking any geological institutions to have any inspections done to the railroads that come through? Are we asking them to do any damage
Excuse me.
That would be
inspection
involved,
for the dams that we have around us? I'm not making a comparison because I know that nuclear disaster is way beyond what can happen in those areas. So I'm willing to see that we do get into the picture of NRCs communicating with high-ranking state and federal officials, and will be included in those communications. And I'd rather go through NRC simply because I think they're a higher agency than USGS, who responds to NRC.
Let me do one thing, and I'm going to take the privilege right now, and I know I have a couple of their lights, but I do have representatives from Diablo Canyon, and I assume the individual standing here is the Geoscience Department or whatever, because Diablo Canyon is one of the only facilities in the United States that has its own geological organization on site. So if you would give us your name, and what I'd like you to do is clarify some of this misinformation on what information is out there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Lloyd Clough. I'm Director of the Geosciences Department for Pacific Gas and Electric Company, and I was brought into pg&E in early 1985 to manage the long-term seismic program, which was a very comprehensive reevaluation of all aspects of geology, seismology, and regional earthquake faults, and the ability of the plant to resist earthquakes. That document has been part of the public record. There were about 45 different review agencies working with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, including the U.S. Geological Survey. I chaired over 60 public meetings during a 7-year period that was reviewed, and a lot of the statements that have been made here, I can understand where they're coming from, but they're inaccurate and misleading. And I would like to have an opportunity to address the board perhaps in the afternoon, but I could take some direct questions right now.
Yes,
Mr. Ryan, you're the only individual who has not spoke beside myself. If you want to make your statement, if you would stand by just a second, we'll see what we can arrange.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a couple questions. If we actually take the action of asking USGS to come in and basically update information in this area because of the recent earthquake, and is that a request to them? Does somebody have to pay for that? Do they just do it all the time, or is it what's the protocol on getting that moving?
What I want to do at this particular time is that we're going to get into much more discussion than we thought. We had an offer to get into a little bit more information about the seismic issues around here. We're going to go to closed session at this particular time. We will convene again back at 2 o'clock, and I will take your invitation to update us on the current information that's out there, and we will deal with other questions directly to you if we can. With that, then I have...
When we come back, we'll start with the answer in my question.
Yeah. I'll put that down. Cost. That was going through my mind, too. Who's going to pay for all this?
You want me to answer that right now?
Go ahead, real quick.
Okay, on Friday, Barbara Boxer said that if the USGS does not have funding in its budget to do it on its own right now, that she and Senator Feinstein would work together to submit legislation to get the USGS to come down here.
Then we have to lobby on from there to get them
All
to do
right.
that.
With that, what I would have, if there anybody from the public who wants to speak on any item that is on the closed session agenda. Seeing none, we will adjourn then to closed session, and we'll reconvene at 2 o'clock. At this particular point, we had not finished item E1 this morning. We were in discussion with the board, and I want to bring it back to that. But there was a lot of information that was being given out, and what I'd like to do, since we're going to want to deal with some current information, is invite the gentleman back up again from the PG&E to make a presentation that he offered to make earlier on. And Mr. Collins will finish this up and then get to the Department of Social Services in a minute. We're trying to, he has some information on disk, but if you would, please. And I think he said about 10 or 15 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. What I would propose is that during the break, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My name is Lloyd Clough, C-L-U-F-F. I'm Director of the PG&E Geosciences Department, and I manage PG&E's earthquake risk management program for all PG&E facilities. So what I would propose I do, since you went into, took a recess for the public, I got my computer out and I pulled off some images and some maps that will help clearly communicate the accurate information about Diablo Canyon. And then one of the supervisors, Shirley, asked me some questions about the county, how to manage county earthquake risks in the unreinforced masonry construction and so forth. And so I'll address that as well.
Actually, it was the wisdom of having a comprehensive.
Yes,
Okay.
right. I will show you how that works. Not only am I the Director of Geosciences for PG&E, but I have been the Chairman of the California Seismic Safety Commission. I was the Utilities Commissioner for almost 15 years, Chairman of the Commission for 2 terms, and I held a hearing in San Luis Obispo at the Embassy Suites on upgrading seismically vulnerable buildings in the county right after Loma Prieta. I also manage PG&E, and I'm the manager for the California Energy Commission of seismic risks for the entire state of California for our electric system. We have a joint venture between PG&E, the University of California, Berkeley, the U.S. Geological Survey, and other interested parties where we do the research at the Pacific Earthquake Engineering Research Center on all the electric systems for the entire state, and I'm the director of that activity. So let me move in. The questions that, as I sat here this morning, and which is the best screen for me? This one over here, I guess, for you to look at.
You can pull that microphone around.
Okay, is I'll address these topics: activity of faults in San Luis Obispo County, the tectonic framework developed for the Diablo Canyon long-term seismic program, the relationship of the San Simeon earthquake to that program and our findings, the earthquake performance of the power plant, how we manage the risk, focus on other kinds of building stock in the county, and prioritize plan to manage earthquake risk. The next. Do I have control up here? No. So we do this through understanding earthquake hazards, looking at the performance of facilities, not only our own, but anywhere in the world during earthquakes. We do consequence evaluation of all of our facilities, and then we manage the risk with prudent priority program, and then out of those priorities drives our mitigation action, whether it be Diablo Canyon or other power plants or our big hydro system. Next. I won't take the time to read all of this. This is the requirements for the long-term seismic program when I joined PG&E in 1985, where required us to do a comprehensive reevaluation of the geology and seismology, to reevaluate the program that's extended over 7 years, included the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the U.S. Geological Survey, and 24, including 24 other organizations, universities, or national laboratories. I chaired 60 public meetings, many of them down here in San Luis Obispo during those 7 years. And PG&E continues as a license requirement to monitor earthquakes worldwide to look for data that's relevant to seismic safety of Diablo Canyon. Next. These are the elements of the long-term seismic program. I won't spend a lot of time on there, but we did the geology, geophysics, earthquake magnitude, the ground motions, the shaking that we're worried about, and then the ability of the structures and components to accommodate those motions. Next. And so the results of that study, this is out of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's approval of our operating license. They said there's a greatly improved understanding of the geology and tectonics of Central California coast, important to assessing earthquake potential for the region. Next. And so the NRC finds that the geological and seismic aspects were adequate, and we had advanced the state of the knowledge in these disciplines significantly. Next. The U.S. Geological Survey's conclusion, they were involved in the entire 7 years, and we've kept in touch with them. I was on the phone with the USGS every day after the occurrence of the earthquake, finding out what they had and what we were recording on our instruments, sharing the data. I won't take time. They just said this is the most comprehensive program that they have ever reviewed, and it marks as an unusually comprehensive study of an earthquake hazards. The credit for this effort belongs to the able and highly professional team that PG&E assembled. Next. So the conclusion of the NRC after those 7 years was that they find that the Diablo Canyon long-term seismic program served as a useful check on the adequacy of the seismic safety margins, and the margins are acceptable. And we continue to keep reviewing that as earthquakes occur anywhere in the world that have relevant data. Next. Let's go into some maps. Show you, here's the coastline, San Luis Obispo here, Diablo Canyon there. The San Simeon fault comes down here and steps over and becomes the Husgary fault offshore. And the large triangles are the pg&E seismic stations, and the small triangles are the USGS. What we found when the USGS and the NRC got involved in looking at the quality of the recordings and so forth in this part of California, that the USGS station coverage was inadequate, so was Berkeley's and so was Caltech's. So they asked us if we wouldn't, and we volunteered, and it's part of our license condition now, that we would install this 18-station network to accurately locate earthquakes that are important to Diablo Canyon. These are linked directly by microwave into the USGS at Menlo Park, and we trade data, and as I'm speaking, we're still working with the USGS to assess the San Simeon earthquake. Next. Here's the report out of our 1988 long-term seismic map. The oceanic fault, the fault that released this earthquake, is here. These are all the active faults that we characterized during the long-term seismic. I note that we had characterized it. We characterized it as a thrust fault, and there's where the earthquake occurred. Next. This is the previous seismicity in background that we have been recording, and that have been from 87 to 97. All these little circles are earthquakes, some almost as big as this one that occurred, the San Simeon, and there. So this occurred exactly where we would have expected earthquakes. This was no surprise to us. Here's the oceanic fault. Next. Here's the historical seismicity going back to the 1800s, with earthquakes all about the size, or some a little bit bigger, than the San Simeon earthquake. The next slide shows where the earthquake occurred in December. So it was in an area where we expected earthquakes of this magnitude. Next. Here's the aftershock sequence. I'll just go through very quickly to show you the spreading of aftershocks. This is for just, I think, one day. Oh no, this is from December 22nd to January the 5th. This is all of them. Let's see the next one. This is a cross-section. This is how we characterize the oceanic fault. This is what these aftershock focal mechanisms are telling us. I drew this line on here this afternoon, about 15 minutes ago. This is my interpretation. We'll see if my staff and the USGS agrees with that, but can see that this is what I think is a favored geometry, and the motion, which is a thrust fault. The nacimiento may have released some energy as well, because it probably is a strike-slip fault that's near vertical. Next. So the next few slides are just going to show you the growing of the aftershocks in the area. Let's just go one right after another. They're tied here. These are in 3-day increments. So keep going. One more. This is back to the January the 5th. Here is what we call the Los Osos Santa Maria domain. The Diablo Canyon power plant is right here. This is our structural block model, and the edge of the model is the strike-slip Husgary fault, and the northeastern boundary is the oceanic fault. So we had characterized this as a block that's moving down the coast and being uplifted in frequent earthquakes. Next. And here's where we'd characterize the oceanic fault as an important player where the San Simeon comes down, is related to the oceanic. The San Simeon is almost a pure strike-slip fault. It steps over and becomes the Hosgri here, but the oceanic, the geometry is oriented so the compression in this area changes that fault to a thrust. So all faults that have the geometry and strike in that angle with the Hosgri and San Simeon are thrust or oblique slip faults, where these that are more straightly inclined or on the surface are strike slip faults. Next. I show you this from the big earthquake that occurred in 2002 in Alaska, where the fault ruptured from right here for 340 kilometers, involved 3 faults. It crossed the pipeline. I helped design the pipeline to accommodate that earthquake, magnitude 7.9, and we designed it by my recommendation for 18 feet of displacement right here, and it survived it without 1 drop of oil being spilled. The point I want to make here is this stress transfer map. These colors indicate the hazard, and you follow where the next earthquakes are likely to occur. The hot spots, like these warm colors, are where this fault is likely to rupture again with a significant earthquake. The area that ruptured, where the pipeline is now, will probably not have a big earthquake for at least 500 years. So let me show you what the one looks like down here. Next. Here's that same model, same kind of model used. This was generated for us by the U.S. Geological Survey at our request. And here's the coastline. Here's Diablo Canyon. And here is the San Simeon fault. Here is the oceanic fault. And here's the Hosgri fault. So we wanted to have this because we were concerned about big aftershocks coming southward onto the Hosgri, and we wanted the plant to be prepared that if that migration were going, that we would alert them. This shows that it's now cool colors, so the likelihood of earthquakes on the Hosgri, given the tectonic stress as we understand it today, has lessened the potential for earthquakes on the Hosgri fault. It's heightened it for earthquakes on the San Andreas and the Nacimiento and some of the other nearby faults, and the San Simeon fault that goes to the north. Next. So the next step is that we're in the process of combining PG&E's data with the USGS data to write our report, the PG&E report, to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and to the county, share that with you, integrating all of our data and looking at our past interpretations and concluding what changes we think we might want to make, if any. Next. So there are still going to be aftershocks. The estimate that comes out of the algorithm from the USGS is that up through March, we expect a 22% likelihood of earthquakes bigger than magnitude 5. So this is going to go on for about a year in this area. Next. So let me address our program. This is our program at PG&E, Seismic Risk Management Program. We evaluate all of our facilities and operations. We establish a level of risk that's based on either regulatory criteria or our own interest in restoring services. And then we prioritize selected facilities for mitigation and implement that mitigation. Next. Here's an example of building performance. This is from the earthquake in 1971 in San Fernando, the Veterans Building Hospital. This is what a lot of buildings in San Luis Obispo County that are unreinforced masonry will look like after a close, large earthquake. Next. Another one from Loma Prieta in San Francisco, 60 miles away from the earthquake. These cars and 7 people were killed out on the street from this debris. Next. Close-up of that. Next. I want to show you a couple examples from Turkey. I have visited every major significant earthquake in the world since I joined PG&E, and I was doing it long before, it's part of my practice just to learn from earthquakes. This earthquake that occurred in August of '99 ruptured for over 100 kilometers to here. In November, stress transfer caused the Dushi fault to go off in a stress transfer of another magnitude 7.1 earthquake. Let me show you what happened from this in 2 or 3 images. Next. Here is what the unreinforced masonry buildings look like. 40,000 people. We think about 40,000 people lost their lives. The next slide shows some of the details. Next slide shows a school building. Next slide shows an aerial view of Kolchak. The buildings here are the older buildings, and the story is, you notice that there are thousands or hundreds of buildings just in this few, if you start counting them, that are collapsed. They are the modern buildings. The building code in this part of Turkey is the same as Los Angeles and San Francisco, except they have no power to enforce it. So there's cheating that goes on. The buildings are built without being checked. The reinforcing bar is sold on the black market, all kinds of things. And when I got back and I was interviewed by the governor of the Golchek area, I noted this mosque. And I'd heard about the corruption and the lack of enforcing the building code, and I said, it was amazing to me that the older buildings were standing and the mosque was untouched. In fact, we actually went down and walked through it in the daytime after we landed the helicopter, and he said, well, God, all the building contractors won't be corrupt in front of God. So in a mosque, they met the building code. And these older buildings were much better designed, but in the last 15 years, a lot of the buildings in Turkey, the corruption is just all over, and this is what you get. Next. Another problem is liquefaction of buildings where the foundation fails. It's a simple problem to fix. Next. It's a matter of understanding the ground and putting in pilings rather than just a slab on grade. And you have these kinds of liquefaction problems in San Luis Obispo County. Next. Here's, you can see where there's no pilings beneath this building. Next. And so this is where these earthquakes were triggered by a marching of earthquakes from magnitude 7.9, 7.1, 7.2 from 1939 until they culminated in these earthquakes in 1999. The big question is, how about Istanbul? There are 18 million people that live in vulnerable buildings in Istanbul. Next. So here is buildings that meet the code that's corrupt. These have all been built on the outskirts of Istanbul within the last 10 years. And the people I worked with there said they will look like all of those buildings in Izmit. Next. So coming back to the last slide, our program that we have in PG&E that my staff manages, we don't do the work, we just work with the operating people to make sure the work is done to the standards that we've all agreed upon. It's the same slide I showed before except for the last bullet. I will make the commitment for PG&E that our expertise from my department is available to assist the San Luis Obispo County in looking at what we do to see if there's some guidance there that might be useful to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cliff. Let's see, is there any questions any of the board members have of the data? I know it's a quick overview of everything,
Yes.
and I appreciate it. Shirley?
Yeah, I'll repeat my question for the public. My question was the wisdom of taking the expertise of the USGS, and I'm going to stick just with USGS for the time being.
Okay.
It's a less volatile designation, let me phrase it that way, and applying it to the infrastructure that we have within the county, including but not limited to Diablo Canyon. Because as Cacho mentioned, we have trains that go through here, our roads go through here, oil pipelines, gas pipelines, water, all of that stuff. So I think you understand my question.
Yes, thank you. I was asked that question before we broke, and so my response to that is the USGS is, without question, one of the most competent, revered, and respected scientific organizations in the world. I have worked with them for more than 40 years. I was appointed by the Department of Interior's Gail Norton to oversee all of the USGS earthquakes program for the nation. So I know what they do. They're very good people. Now,
That's why
they are scientists.
that's why we need their stamp of approval.
They are scientists. They're not engineers. So if you go in that direction of getting their advice, and they're already involved and they're doing an evaluation, they do this for every earthquake anywhere in the United States, you need to engage some people in the structural engineering and the earthquake engineering part to get to the final answer that you're looking for. And we would be pleased to work with anyone that is selected. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission will certainly have a say in this.
Thank you.
Mr. Asajian?
My question is, thank you for qualifying USGS for what they do. But isn't NRC an above agency?
Did the NRC, excuse me, what?
Aren't they above USGS as far as being an agency?
No, they are just in charge of safety of nuclear power plants, and they use the USGS as a consultant, as they do university professors and the National Laboratory.
And the response NRC gave to Senator Boxer, is that any input taken from USGS?
I don't know. I can't answer that.
Thank you.
By the way, I noticed your name, Armenian. I went to Armenia right after the big earthquake in 1988 and helped Armenia in their emergency response.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I was going to say something about, weren't you there too?
I didn't.
Ms. Pinard?
Well, I just want to get into the discussion, so I have no questions for Mr.
Okay.
Cloud.
I appreciate it very much for your time and effort during the lunch hour to come back and give that, and I think it's been very enlightening.
So you may make hard copies of that. I didn't have time, but that's my record of my testimony,
Well,
so you can
appreciate
keep
it.
that.
Thank you
yes.
very much. And I do want to state also on the record that you did offer in,
Yes.
in assisting anything on down the line in terms of information and knowledge you have on.
Yes, I have structural engineers on my staff. I'd be glad in a conceptual way to show you how we prioritize and rank our structures for upgrade.
Thank you. Okay, the issue that we have before us is that the current we want an analysis of the, by USGS of the current information regarding earthquakes. So I think we need to keep our direction to that specific thing and not try to resolve all the problems that we have. So with that, Ms. Pinard, you said you wanted to say something?
Yes, I do. And I found the prior presentation very enlightening, but it's not really what we're dealing with here. The question before us is the dates that were on that, if I made notice, you were talking, one was 1991, the other was 1988, and the whole reason for the question is that this is 2004, and we had something happen December 22nd, 2003. And all this request is asking is that the information that USGS has, that we ask them for their information. I appreciate your expertise and technical abilities, but you do work for PG&E. And this is why we have public entities that work independently for all the safety reasons that kind of checks and balances provides us. The idea that we should, Katja, that we would just ask NRC, we did already do that, and they're not an agency above USGS. What they said is if you want this information included, then the government agency needs to ask USGS. They have said that clearly. So not by thinking you're just going to go ask the NRC is to ignore the information and the written directions they've already given to us. So with that, my motion would be that we ask the U.S. Geological Survey that their current information and any information that would be helpful regarding earthquakes, that this information be, first of all, requested, and second of all, that it be included with any update or any licensing that we're doing. I'm not going anywhere differently than that. We have a whole series of things coming up, and all I'm saying is whatever happened between December 22nd and now needs to be included in any decision that any agency makes. So
Do we have a
that's it.
second to that motion? I hear
Well,
no second to the motion.
Wait a minute.
No, I hear no
I'll second it. Excuse me, I'll second it for purposes of discussion. We can incorporate any, I don't know, Mr. Clough, you may be interested in standing there listening to this. I don't have a question anymore. We need to incorporate it. We must incorporate any of the USGS material that we get into the ISFAC development plan that we will be preparing. I don't know that we have, after I got my letter, and David Sneed, you can have a copy of this later. I don't know that we can become involved in requiring of the NRC what it is requiring, what it will be requiring in its licensing procedure, because it states that this means that the county cannot set any standards different from the NRC's with respect to radiological health and safety and the common defense and security. So I don't know that we can require the NRC to include this information. I wish we could, but I'm not sure that we can.
Mr. Clough, would you mind correcting one thing that I think is a misstatement here? Much of the information you showed came from years past, but you are currently involved in this on an ongoing basis. This is not a stagnant thing that did a 7-year study and then put it on the shelf and walk away.
That's correct. I spend probably 40% of my time at PG&E incorporating new data, looking at earthquakes. We have at least 3 earthquakes every year that we investigate and work with. We work with the U.S. Geological Survey on all of those earthquakes. And as we're speaking, my scientists are right now working with the U.S. Geological Survey, and I would guess that once we finish our more in-depth report that will be sent to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, it's likely the Nuclear Regulatory Commission will request that the U.S. Geological Survey review it and give them their comments. I can't say that, but I would guess they would.
I have a question.
Let me go to Mr. Ryan.
Going along with what you're saying there, with your work with USG, what is their role? You're doing a report that you're going to turn in to the NRC, but the USG is also gathering data. Are they going to turn that into a report, or is that just information that's used for further study as things happen?
Oh, if you look at the USGS's website, they produce a report every day. They're preliminary, not approved for publication yet, but eventually, every earthquake, the USGS will publish a very high caliber scientific explanation of the earthquake and how it relates. And I would guess they will use a lot of the data that we've developed on the tectonics of this area to do that.
And how long does it usually take them to
come
out with that report?
I would say probably several months to a year before they would be issued. You'd have to ask them, but our report will be done in probably a couple of months.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Bianchi.
No, the comment I was going to make is that last night, we had a real whumper up there again, although it only recorded 2.7. In the middle of the night, I guessed it at 3.5, but, and maybe PG&E, someone from PG&E, not necessarily you, but how frequently is the infrastructure out there, not, the wells and all that kind of stuff, how frequently is that reevaluated for these continual aftershocks?
Well,
WOMAC is also getting.
Yeah, we watch that very closely for our, not only Diablo Canyon, but at other facilities. And until a year or two has gone by, you don't know whether these are aftershocks or one of them might be, the earthquake may have been a foreshock to a bigger one on the San Andreas or the San Simeon. So we keep our eyes on this. We're watching how these earthquakes are moving. And Caltrans Caltrans is part of our joint venture with the State Energy Commission on our management of earthquake risk for the electric and gas systems. And they're doing that for highways. They'll be publishing a report on any damage or effects it has on highways. There may be others that I'm not aware of.
I was just thinking of the plant itself. I think Mr.
Thank you. My name is Larry Womack, and I'm Vice President Nuclear Services at Diablo for PG&E. And Supervisor Bianchi, in response to your question, the stresses and the effect of a seismic event is known for all of our safety piping systems at Diablo. That's a requirement that's set based upon the inputs that were provided by Mr. Clough and his predecessors, I guess I should say Dr. Clough, and his predecessors to set the design requirements for the facility. As we've indicated, we have done a walk down of the facility and have determined that none of our piping connections are leaking. On top of that, periodically, as required by our license, we do go and perform what we call non-destructive examination, either an ultrasonic exam or other types of exams of piping connections to make sure that they have absolute integrity. This is something that's done routinely through the course of operation of the plant.
Okay, you said periodically and routinely. How periodically and routinely?
We routinely inspect a sample of the piping connections at each refueling outage.
That's how.
And in that sense, through the course of the plant life, and I believe it's approximately every 10 years, we kind of go through the plant, or a large portion of the plant in total, to look at the connections to make sure that their integrity is assured, not only retrospectively, but going forward in time.
So for structural integrity, you look at it about every 10 years?
Yes, and this is as a result of both our license and the ASME, the American Society of Mechanical Engineering Code, and a national code that's used not only at nuclear power plants, but put in place for other businesses.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Can I follow up
If
before
I
we
could just add a comment to that, if we were to find my geosciences group that includes structural engineers, if we were to find some surprise in an earthquake in Armenia or Switzerland or France or wherever,
San Andreas.
San Andreas, we would take that information and the plant would do specific inspections to look for that new information.
Yeah. Ms. Bernard, let me get that.
No, I was just every 10 years was making me nervous.
I wanted to ask a question. Are you? With
Wait
an
a
event
second,
like
wait a
this-
second. Mr. Ryan, I recognize Ms. Bernard.
And she defaulted to me.
I gave him the floor.
With an event like this that takes place, do you go in and do any of your sonic testing of welds or stress points just on a spot check to see if there's been any effect?
The most sensitive indication we have is to walk down the piping systems and look at them visually for signs of movement, signs of distress, any indications of leakage. These are all readily apparent to the qualified, trained, naked eye. Our operations, engineering, and inspection personnel have conducted those types of inspections on the afternoon following the December 22nd earthquake. In addition to our personnel, I think as NRC has shared publicly, they've done similar inspections both the day of the earthquake and just this last week completed an independent inspection of Diablo.
Okay. And one other question. On your 10 years, you say you go through it. You don't do it all on the 10th year.
No.
That period of time, by the end of the 10 years, you have inspected it?
That's correct. And again, I'm not maybe the perfect expert to respond to all the details of what we call our in-service inspection program, but it is comprehensive. We go through roughly a 10-year cycle, and each of the refueling outages, we do a sampling or a piece of that inspection such that we've kind of gone through the facility per se in a 10-year period.
Ms. Bernard?
Yes, if it will help to simplify the motion, I will be prepared to do so. But the heart of what is going on here is that our information at this point is only coming from PG&E. The NRC has been very clear that it says if you want USGS information, you need to ask for it. And that is what I'm doing right here. The irony about only having information come from the provider of the benefit is that they do not have ultimate liability for the public. They have a special arrangement as a nuclear power plant, and then also as a company in bankruptcy where recent behavior would not necessarily garner tremendous confidence. I mean, bankruptcy with the state of California and then still giving chief executives $1 million bonuses. There's a lot to say
Let's stay
that
on
when
the
you have.
subject.
I've been more on the subject than a lot of the discussion that's been
We're
going on
not
here.
talking the
all
executive
right?
salaries, we're talking,
I think we are
the
talking
information.
about the fact that you are getting information from only a private company who has its own agenda and its own profit reporting to do for its own people. What you have the ability here, the NRC said, you have the ability to get independent information from the USGS. Ask for it. My motion is very simple, that this board ask for the U.S. Geological Survey on all current information regarding the earthquakes.
thank you, Mr. Sajan and then Ms. Bianchi, and I'll have a statement and we'll move on the motion.
I have two questions. One is to,
Since Senator Boxer has been in town and this came from her, she was among the first who asked the question to NRC, and some of my colleagues had an opportunity to meet with her. Was there any comments made by her that you can share
Yes,
with
there
us?
was. I had a comment from Ms. Boxer that she had received a letter from the NRC and was satisfied with their response.
Yeah,
And
That's
her,
accurate.
her request was that there be further inspection of the plant in its operation, and that was responded to, and she was satisfied with that.
I have a modification to the motion.
I was gonna, okay, if you want to go ahead, I was gonna offer one.
That we, the motion would basically remain the same, but that we request a complete analysis from USGS on all the current information regarding the earthquake systems in San Luis Obispo County, and so that we can get information on all the other ones as well. And that this information be incorporated in all decision-making bodies where it is appropriate or where it can be included,
Why don't you
including
say
Diablo
that-
Canyon.
Why don't you just say that it's forwarded on to the
Excuse me,
respective
excuse me a
agencies?
second.
That's fine,
Ms.
or
Bernard.
forwarding it on to the respective agencies would be fine too. But we need to have this
Mr.
information.
Sajan.
Yeah, I was gonna simplify it further than that we do receive this information, and we as a board, once we know what the findings are, we decide where that information has to go and how to be considered.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor that had a second. Does the second wish to change that original motion to what you,
Yes.
does the primary?
I'm agreeable to that.
So we don't have a motion on the floor.
Well, my
Now, the
motion
second-
is,
I do. You just asked me if I would change my motion to include some of the verbiage that Shirley suggested, and that's fine with me.
I'm sorry,
have
I
the
didn't
original
hear it that
motion?
way.
Yeah, I
Second.
did, and I agreed that.
So
I
that the
would-
motion that stands on the floor is that we will collect this information, and we will, what is your final conclusion? Because
and-
it's not clear.
And disseminate it to all the appropriate agencies.
Okay, so the whole motion then would be to
That's it.
collect the information regarding earthquakes, and this information be disseminated to the appropriate agencies.
Wait a second. What I heard was,
Well, what did-
I'm sorry, Supervisor Pinard made a motion that it also be included in any update and licensing of Diablo, and when I heard wait. Supervisor Bianchi said it's basically that motion and adding this. Now, are you changing and moving out the Diablo information?
Yes.
Okay, and you agree to that?
And I agree because it can be
Okay.
just for the record,
Okay.
so, because it can be a two-step process.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Okay, so the maker and the motion have modified the motion that the information will be gathered and disseminated, and we're not targeting any specific item, but it's on the
Correct.
general.
And it's all
Okay, on the
earthquake
motion,
systems,
yeah.
all earthquake systems in the county
Yeah,
of
in
San
the
Luis
system.
Obispo.
Mr. Ryan?
I would like
Last
the clerk to repeat the motion verbatim.
Yeah, I think so, because
Well, that's a good idea.
Well, but now you're just asking the USGS to study earthquake systems in San Luis Obispo County, incorporate that with any other earthquake information, and it's to be disseminated out to all appropriate decision-making bodies. Period.
That you understand, you understand? We have a motion on the floor. All's in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed? No opposed? We'll carry on with the business. Thank you. One thing I think needs to be clarified on it. There is information that USGS is already putting together, as I understand. So this is not really a request for more funding to have USGS
no
do more.
funding.
Yeah, that's
No
fine
funding.
because between the legislative process and what funds are available out there, I don't know that we would see that. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for the information on that. And anybody would like to have one of those discs, I'm sure we can get copies of them. With that, we'll go on to item F1.
F1 is submittal of a report regarding revenue shortfall for the Department of Social Services resulting in the deletion of 18.5 full-time positions